Hey, I'm Brendan. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a quick video where we just open a pinball machine, and I'm going to show you the inside and describe the general features that you'll find in most games, and just kind of give you the wow factor of looking at the insanity of the underside and inside of a pinball machine, because it's insane, and you'll see why in a second. So, to open a pinball machine, it always starts with the front coin door, and this game doesn't have a lock. This game lock is forced open, so don't even need a key. And then you have a little pull lever here to take this, which is called the lockdown bar. You take that off. Normally this is where you would slide the glass off the machine, but I've already taken it out. One very important step is to take the balls out of the game, because if you lift the playfield up with the balls still inside, they can fall out and damage stuff. So give myself a little room to get past, and here we go. So that is the underside of a pinball game, and if you think it's insane, that's because it is. I've read crazy stats about pinball games. I'm not sure which ones are true and which aren't, but I've heard that a typical pinball game has about a half a mile of wire in it. I've heard things like there's more parts in a pinball machine than a Ford Taurus. I don't know what's true, but those things could be true. I'm not sure. This machine is particularly simple by comparison to a lot of other games. You'll see machines with even crazier amounts of components and subway ramps and all sorts of gadgets and gizmos and circuit boards and motors and things like that. But typically when something breaks on a pinball, this is where you're going to be working. You're going to be repairing flipper mechanisms like this, or changing light bulbs, or fixing wires that broke off, and that kind of stuff, and changing lights off of this grid, or any number of things can go wrong when you're dealing with mechanical devices like this. It's just a matter of time before something breaks or something gets dirty and a contact switch doesn't make connectivity and that kind of thing. So it can be a little overwhelming, but there are ways to isolate issues. There are instruction manuals that kind of explain which color wires are going where and that kind of thing. And luckily for doing repairs, a lot of these parts have become kind of standardized. You can buy a flipper rebuild kit and they will fit a set number of games. It's the same part in these same 20 machines or something. So you're not necessarily chasing down specific parts for every game. Yeah, so that's the underside of the playfield. Inside the cabinet here, this is the instruction manual to Pinbot. So like I said, you have full schematics and parts diagrams, and, all sorts of instructions on how the game works. And inside the cabinet is pretty straightforward. You have your main power transformer here, which is where your main power is coming in and getting distributed to everywhere in the game. You have a subwoofer speaker here for sound. So most pinball machines will have between 2 and 3 speakers, usually a subwoofer and then a tweeter in the back box, sometimes more, if it's a stereo system. This here is the coin box. So you see these 3 slots is where the coins would fall, and you can see the coin mechanisms here. If you were to put a quarter, it would fall through this mechanism and go into the coin box there. One other thing to point out over here, I don't have it hooked up, but this is the tilt mechanism. Maybe I'll flash a picture on this screen of what this should normally look like, where you have a pendulum and a ball here for sensing the tilt if someone is shaking the machine. That's how it knows that you're shaking it too much. So we've taken the back glass off, and now we're going to look inside the head box. But before we get there, we've got some cool stuff to show you here. So this is what's known as the insert, and this is where they install all the light bulbs that illuminate the back glass. It's also where you'll see the score display. This machine has a brand new display from Xpin. This is an LED display. And Xpin, if you're watching, my credit match display is broken. I don't know what happened, but if you can send me a new one, I'd appreciate it. So you'll see I've got some dead segments. Not sure what's going on there, but I'll fix it at some point. You'll also typically see a speaker panel. Newer games will have the display and the speakers kind of integrated into one panel, but this game's a little older and they hadn't quite figured that out yet. So, undo the latch here. And voila, 1980s technology for running a pinball machine. So this is basically a computer system that was developed by Williams specifically to run pinball machines. So we're looking at a game called Pinbot, which is known as a System 11 pinball machine, and that's referring to this CPU board configuration, this whole system as it is. And they made System 11 games from about 1985 to 1990, and they all have various configurations of this board set. All pinball machines, all from different manufacturers and different times that they were manufactured, will have variations of these boards, right? So you'll always have like a main CPU board, right? That's where the game logic is controlled, and the drivers for the solenoids and the lights are kind of like firing on and off there. You'll have a power supply board, which is this board up here. This is distributing power to all of the other boards and the machine itself. This game has a auxiliary flipper power board, so this is just providing powers for the flippers. And then up here we have a sound board. This is responsible for the music and some of the sounds in this game. These System 11 games, they have weird configurations. Some of the sounds come from this board and some of them come from the CPU board. You might notice that there's some AA batteries on this CPU, and these actually store the memory of the machine. And it's kind of a shame that they put these batteries on the board, because what can happen is, if you're not paying attention, these batteries can leak acid and destroy these boards. So if a game has been in storage for a long time, it's one of the first things you want to look at, is to see if the acid has destroyed the board or not, because these can be very costly, if not impossible, to fix if that happens. They do make modifications, which I should probably do to this game at some point, where you don't have the batteries on the board anymore. You can do an off-board battery modification. There's different RAM boards you can get to replace the batteries to just completely take the risk out entirely. And then on this side we have the display driver board, so you can see all these ribbon cables, which you might see in like an old 1980s or 1990s computer. And all these cables are doing is just transferring data to the digital displays. So the CPU is sending the data to this driver board, and then it's distributing it to all the displays on the front panel. And again, newer games will have different configurations. Older games will have different circuit board configurations. But generally speaking, they all have these components: a sound board, a CPU board, a display driver, and a power supply board of some type. It's kind of amazing to think that pinball games today pretty much are running everything off of a board, maybe the size of, I don't know, this board. Everything has been consolidated so small where you don't need giant CPU boards like this anymore. But hey, in the 1980s, they needed all this memory. They needed all these chips to run certain processes that the game needed to do. And while we're talking about chips, these chips here with the labels on them, those are actually the game ROMs. So the software for the game is on those two chips. And then there's some additional sound ROMs up here. So if you pull these ROMs out, you can actually put different game ROMs in and run this CPU in a bunch of other games that it's compatible with. And so that's it. That concludes the tour of the inside of a pinball machine. Like I said, each game and each manufacturer and each decade that pinball games came out will have different technology, and it's always fun to look under the hood and see how things have changed. But I think the 80s machines kind of give you a good idea of the general sense of the different components that you'd find in a pinball machine. Listen, if you like this video, make sure you smash that like button like you would smash the flippers, and we hope to see you for the next one.